I hit a button on my computer on accident. Um, excuse me. Because I was copying my Satori's over and moving everything around, it wasn't even until this week that I was cleaning up all the extra years before and after those sections should start. So Satori is more like a like extra beneficial at this time. For World War II, it's very good and thorough, and I've got everything that I put in there is good stuff. After that, I'm trying to like take time to order it and kind of put stuff in the right place. But that's like a bigger writing editing process that I'll probably try to do next semester for those later sections. So yeah, it's really like what we have in our notes, and of course, like the big things on Satori that are helping to illuminate those notes, some of the videos and whatnot, and then of course, I should not have to tell everybody this, but I'm going to say it just in case somebody didn't know. If you did not watch the videos from the Wednesday night lectures, or you weren't present for them, like you weren't here and didn't watch them, or or you were here, or you missed some, watch those lectures. Like, be familiar with the content. It's not like rocket science stuff that I'm talking about necessarily, but it'll definitely give you some good clues into what we're trying to focus on, what's really important.
When you say videos, where are they on the YouTube list or are they in
Mm-hmm.
Satori? Because
Yeah,
I've listened
YouTube.
to your YouTube list like all weekend, and it does go to like I think like the Henry Ford one, and I don't remember what
They
else.
should go all the way up until the Cold War. The Cold War. I think the last one I did was the Cold War. So, in some of the Satori's, and of course over to in OneNote, there's a tab with links to audio lectures from classes from like 5 years ago that you can listen to, especially because I didn't get to cover these sections. On that, though, I did want to say two things I would encourage you guys to watch as part of your continuing journey of understanding America and our history and future a little bit better. One is watch the Oliver Stone documentary. The link I gave you guys is for the whole thing. You can download all of the MP4s and play them, or just stream them off there if you want. It's helpful. It's good. It definitely fills in a lot of gaps, especially on like geopolitics stuff. The other one, though, that is a really good resource, kind of on the other end, a lot of cultural history, is CNN did a whole series of like 9 or 10 part documentary series on each decade. I think they start in the 50s. I know for sure they do the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and I think they did the 2000s. And they're really, really good. They're very enjoyable to watch, actually. They're very fun to watch. But they're really good at like helping you wrap your mind kind of around the whole second half of the 20th century there, which is a lot to wrap our minds around. But it's also the part of history that we're closer to than 150 years ago. So it's a little bit easier for us to kind of access or wrap our minds around, or go like, I'm more familiar with these terms, even presidents, right? You're more familiar with these presidents than you are the guys in the 1880s and 90s. You're like, I don't know, my parents don't really talk about them. Nobody talks about them anymore. People still talk about JFK and Nixon and Reagan and Bush. Yeah, that's like, I would just encourage you guys, like the CNN documentaries, and it's just like the 2000s, the 90s, or the 1990s. Really enjoyable resources to watch for like filling in historical foot gaps here. Okay. On that note, I am losing my voice, and I am running out of steam on all kinds of different levels here. So I'm not going to probably talk for a whole hour. I just kind of want to maybe look at some big, broad themes over the end of the 20th century. So where we left off, kind of talking about the Cold War, and kind of this setup for the whole second half of the century that's going to drive communism, capitalism, this international battle. Those things that are like in play, we got a good foundation for why they exist, right? Like after going through the world wars and kind of what happens right after, you know, the end of the second one and post-colonialism, you should have an understanding for why the Cold War was happening or why this thing was developing between America and the Soviets. With that, with the ability to look at cause and effect and reason out like, oh, the linkage between things happening, to say, I don't understand this here. I either need to go deeper or earlier or both. Those are the kind of tools that you guys need to have to navigate any kind of information, but particularly history, you know, moving forward in life when you're trying to figure out stuff for yourself that you know, you're trying to determine the veracity of it. Is it truthful or not? Is it worthwhile or not? I would also hope that at this point you would feel that you've got a much better sense of what's a good source and what's not. There's a lot of fake news floating around, right? That's one of those themes I'm like trying to develop in throughout the course there. Need to do a lot more work on that, but my hope would be, and I feel probably confident that if you guys have survived this long up to this point, that it would be true that you're like, oh, I can sniff out bullcrap a little bit quicker. I know what looks like a real news source and what looks like a QAnon 4chan chat board, right? Like, that's not as scary or confusing to anybody, hopefully, as it would have been 4 months ago. You might not still feel like you've got a handle on all of that, but the path has begun. So,
well, some people still like when they're quoting or they're saying, oh, well, you know, I'm just saying, for instance, oh, Donald Trump said that, or someone said this, or Obama did this, or whatever. And then you ask them to fact check it. It's most likely they got their sources from whoever supports that party, who is saying something negative about the other party or the other person.
Yeah.
You have to realize, who are you getting your sources from? How are they connected to the main person that they're talking about? I noticed that too. And so I know I like checking out, you know, factcheck.org and other sources to make sure that it's just all corroborates that was not the truth or part of it is true.
Yeah, right. Like, and nobody's got all the time in the world to go fact check everything. But when something sounds really fishy, your fishy meter goes off, right? Your bullshit meter goes off. You're like, that doesn't sound right. You can ask them to prove that or back it up.
And they can't. They
can't. And if they give you something that still smells fishy, you know how to fish it out. You know how to sort that out. Go, this is not actually right. Yeah. So in the Cold War, this is really like, and I'm just going to talk for like 15 minutes here on kind of just big theme levels spanning 1945 to 2015. Because we most certainly enter a different age of America in 2015 or 16. Most certainly. But over this time, what I see happening is the world crumbling during World War II. Everybody's society kind of collapses in on itself. Largely except for America. America's one of the most stable places, you know, quote unquote, before and after the war. Certainly more than any European country and more than any Asian country or Latin American country or African country. America's kind of cruising, and that's why we exit the war as the big winner. Because not only do we win militarily the way the Soviets do, we're going to win materially with materialism and dollar diplomacy and putting kind of the American economy in place around the world. So American leaders, especially foreign policy setters are they are trying to export the American dream in some sort of fashion out around the world. The rest of the world is desperately trying to like find some rocks and pillars that are not going to be shaky and give way, because all of them fell down. Religion, government, society, all these things, they kind of crumbled down. And so everybody's trying to rebuild. Some people are trying to rebuild out of a very positive vision for the future. Other people are trying to rebuild out of a sense of like security for the future because they're afraid. But the Soviets and the Americans kind of set the pace for the, what people are going to gravitate towards for stability and security. So that's either communism or capitalism. You have two kind of competing ideas there. And in that, both groups rope everything into their economic systems. So it's not just like, you have to believe in communism to for the Soviet half of the world. You have to believe in all of these very specific Soviet type things about communism and what should be allowed and not allowed in groupthink, and kind of like everybody has to have uniformity of thought. And it's kind of the same way on the other side. Played out differently, but it's a uniformity of thought. And the countries that don't align with either of these two groups, they're called the third world. They're developing nations that haven't been fought over a lot because they're not hyper valuable to a lot of other countries outside of their natural resources that you can extract from them, like in colonialism, oil and coal and rubber and that kind of stuff. So this like power struggle that's going on throughout the world, it erupts in Korea and Vietnam and Afghanistan and Lebanon and Israel and Egypt and the Sudan, and oh my, it just kind of goes all around the world. It's all over Latin America, and America, the United States of America is getting very heavy-handed in their approach to enforcing their vision of the world on other countries, as are the Soviets. I think I've mentioned this before, but it's a great show. It's a little slow, but it's a really good show called The Americans, on like sleeper agents. They actually call them illegals. They're like Russian spies who come over as teenagers and grow up with fake identities and like have kids here and live as Americans, and their kids don't even know they're Russians. It's based on real people. Like, that happened. The spying is crazy. The deep state, things like the CIA, grow infinitely powerful in the wake of World War II. Kind of the way a lot of that deep state will grow infinitely more powerful in the wake of 9/11. We give a lot of more power to the CIA and the NSA and the new Department of Homeland Security. So all the way up to 1989, there is kind of a battle being waged for the quote-unquote future of the free world. And a lot of people in the West look at communism and the Soviets in particular, but China, North Korea, Vietnam, and see a very bleak future that must be fought against. And I think there's some merit to that. Those countries are not necessarily good countries. They are not like doing great things with their ideas of communism. I don't know that America was either with capitalism. I'm not saying they're equal by any means. But the Cold War reduced everything down to black and white. I mean, TV was even in black and white, right? Everything's good and evil. And coming out of World War II, that felt easier to say. The Nazis are bad and evil. Everybody that fought against them is good. Our cause was just. But now, decades later after the war, there's just a lot more layers to it than that. There's a lot more pieces that we have to, consider and go, okay, well, not all the things that the Soviets did were bad, and certainly not all the things that the Americans did were good. And this kind of fake idea of black and white in the world being broken down that simply gets shattered on 9/11. It gets broken when the Berlin Wall breaks down. And indeed, it's a little bit harder for the Soviets to even try to justify their control over all these satellite countries in like Eastern Europe and Asia that they control. If they're not at war with America. And kind of same thing for America, though we quickly get to transition because we don't lose the Cold War. America doesn't dissolve. The Soviet Union will. So the Berlin Wall will fall in December 1989, right at the end of the 80s. And it is like the thing that has marked it's the icon of the Cold War, and it comes crashing down, and it's by like a spontaneous movement of people. So I think I'm going to pull up a video or two here in a minute, just so we can watch a few of these things live together before transitioning into looking at group work, because now it seems like, well, that's what's in history books, and that's what's been in there for 30, 40 years now. Well, that's not a foregone conclusion that the wall's going to come down or that communism's not going to prevail against America. I mean, I went to grade school out here in the 80s. People were nuts. They were like talking about the Russians wanting to come in and kill everybody at any moment. Red Dawn had just come out. If you don't know what that movie is, you should go watch it. It's a classic. I thought that Russians were going to parachute into the sky and come knife everybody down. I just thought, why would a Russian want to kill me? I don't want to kill any of them. This seems strange. But we know that in hindsight now that that's just not the case, or it wasn't going to play out that way. But we don't have hindsight in the 80s when we're in the moment. What were you going to say?
When we had tension, I think with North Korea, I saw a lot of posts saying like, "Hey, it's not the American people that hate you; it's the White House. Don't bomb us, bomb them."
Yeah, exactly. It's like, dude, I don't want to go get in some crazy ass war with North Korea. I don't got anything against them. I feel bad for their people. Like, I don't want to go to war to prove something or not something to Kim Jong-un. Come on. And I was terrified when I saw a big giant missile take off from Vandenberg Air Force Base. That gave me a moment to just pause. Well, so everything gets kind of shaken in 1989. And it would appear that America won the Cold War, and therefore everything that America had claimed about the Cold War and our position in it and everybody else's positions in it was true and justified and verified by us, quote unquote, winning the war. So without this kind of giant threat of Soviet menace, the first war that's going to come, the first post-Cold War is going to be waged by America with unilateral action. Meaning we kind of just go on our own. We'll get some allies, but we're going to go in and do whatever we want either way, and we'll prove that again. If we didn't make the point in Iraq in 1991, we'll make it again in 2002 and 3, and again. So, and often behind a lot of this is the CIA. So I mentioned maybe a week or two ago that the Soviet Union was trying to take over Afghanistan because though Afghanistan is a landlocked country that's very poor, it borders Pakistan, in the 80s at least, the Soviet Union, China, and Iran. Those are the 4 countries that is like bordered on. So it's a very kind of strategic place, and it's also a place that has historically nobody's been able to control it very well. We send in the CIA to fund Mujahideen freedom fighters. Saddam Hussein being one of these guys who gets funded in the Iraq-Iran civil war, which is kind of related to the Afghanistan war. But we just kind of covertly fund it to give the Soviets their own version of Vietnam. That's what we call it. And it works. It's very demoralizing to them. They lose that war the way we lost the Vietnam War. It cost them a lot of money. And at the end of the 80s, the war was over, and so was the Soviet Union. So the plan won. But if 1989 held this moment where like people are going to spontaneously come together to tear down structures of government that have been oppressive, by the time you get to 1991, 92, America's signaling a very different tone. Internally, there's a whole bunch of stuff going on. One of them being the LA riots in 1992, and kind of a very strong showing of like the future of what a police state is going to look like. One of them is going to be, the invasion of Iraq, kind of on our initiative, without consent, if you will. Just kind of echoing, hey, we won the war. We're the hegemon, the giant superpower left in the world. And then Clinton doesn't quite approach things as the way, Bush and Reagan previously had. And we don't have the international fighting that we did under Bush or Reagan. Some of that, though, it might be bad, actually, because Clinton was reluctant several times to take action against what the CIA and FBI were warning him about Al-Qaeda and Osama bin Laden. And several times we had the chance to capture or kill him, but didn't take it, or he evaded it for different reasons. So this is like you're damned if you do, damned if you don't. It's just in a bad position. There's not like a good option out of this. We create monsters, and then we think, oh, well, we'll kill them. We'll make bigger weapons, which of course just create bigger monsters. And we keep making bigger problems for ourselves over and over and over again. And this is what's going to become very apparent on 9/11. This is all blowback from a lot of the action America and the Western, Britain, France, Germany, Belgium have taken colonially throughout the world, but America particularly. It's blowback from our actions around the world. It's not necessarily things we wanted to count on, and it's not going to be waged in a manner of any kind of war that's ever been before. One of the reasons we struggle so bad in Vietnam is because we went in to fight it like it was World War II. But we were not fighting German armies or even Japanese armies. We were fighting civilians, people that were like dressed in ordinary clothes, women, children, in the jungle, guerrilla warfare. I mean, people just hiding, sabotaging things, little kids walking up to ask you if you'd like to buy some gum. Then they leave their basket and walk away, and you blow up because there was a bomb in the basket. That's in Vietnam. It doesn't start in Iraq. That's just guerrilla warfare. So we struggle with that. And then by the time we get to, the Gulf War, we do very well in, because it is a conventional war. So we go in with tanks and missiles and airplanes and just spank the Iraqi army. I mean, it's embarrassing how lopsided the battle was. It was almost like the Italians invading Ethiopia in 1936. Like, there was just no contest. But come 9/11, come 10 years later, that war is being fought very differently and with different weapons, like civilian articles, like airplanes, like commercial airplanes, and the internet and cell phones and satellite phones and kind of cell networks throughout the world that are not located in any one country, per se. The cells are in different countries, but there's no head to that snake. There's no hub to it. So, getting into that state is absolutely shocking to Americans. I mean, I was just watching some footage of 9/11 the other day, and I can't believe I lived through that time in history. It looks so insane on TV. It's such a crazy looking thing. it fundamentally changed the world. It shifted how everybody thought about the world. And suddenly everything that was black and white for Americans got really gray. And then the people that tried to reduce it simple back down again and make it black and white created more problems, saying, well, they hate our freedom. This is why they're fighting us. And just creating smoke screens that actually aren't helping America stay safe or, understand the enemy in order to protect ourselves against enemies. We're not, that was not the posture of George W. Bush. It was a little bit more the posture of Obama, but still. Yes.
From a Jungian lens, 9/11 was a completely unexpected event. And so, like, when it happens, everything was in chaos. Even if you're an analyst, you kind of were in chaos because you didn't know how to interpret it. So what Bush did, and this is what all politicians do, so I'm not critiquing him. Maybe you could say there's a better approach, but the thing is, I still think it's what politicians do. He created a narrative of good and evil, and he justified, like, bombing Afghanistan, and I read polls that many Americans supported it, like over 90%.
Oh, yeah.
So, so you see how it's, when you're in that much chaos, not only is any narrative good, but chances are that is the best you can do. Don't get me wrong, like, I think there are a bunch of different interpretations, but, like, let's face it, like, when you have hijackers hijack your plane and bomb your city, especially if you're right there, there's no way you can, unless, like, you're like a hardcore historian, like, who does nothing but research it, and even then you probably won't do it that well. There's no way you can interpret it any other.
No, yeah, I agree. Yeah, I mean, because what happened the last time America got bombed like that? Oh, he declared war on Japan and went to war against Japan and waged a military campaign against Japan. So we did it the same, but it didn't work. It doesn't work the same because all the pieces moved around and changed, right?
Yeah, and the thing is, what makes it more pernicious is at least the Japanese had, like, their nation, they were militaristic, they had goals that you could sort of understand, and they bombed a military base. Like, they bombed our Navy.
Yeah.
These guys are cities, and they did it in New York City. So the implication is, when you learn that, is that can happen anywhere else.
Yes.
So even just, like, the vulnerability you must have felt, like, it's no wonder people reacted the way they did. I actually don't think, don't get me wrong, I like to think that there's a good proper way to react, but in that initial moment, a few years after, unless, like, you're like a brilliant person, there is no good way you can react to that. At least not initially, at least.
No, because it's an evil act. So there's no good way to come. Like, there's no counterpoint where you can go like, "Well, we can do this," and it's the right response. It will balance this out. It will undo. Like, no, there's no one. That's just happened. Whatever happened there, the causes for that, they were happening before, but what are they? Like, nobody seemed to know. The CIA. I don't like the CIA, you guys. They are probably the greatest threat to American democracy. And they're probably recording this, but I don't care. They're a paramilitary group who is increasingly, they came out of World War II, and they've increasingly removed themselves from any civilian oversight, any congressional oversight, any legal oversight or accountability. And they have instigated so many wars, assassinations, coups, plots. Sometimes they were not the worst thing to be doing, right? Like, I don't care that they went and helped people overthrow Muammar Gaddafi. That guy was he was a criminal opportunist. He was a horrible person, a dictator. His people hated him. He was a bad guy. He was not somebody that should be running any government anywhere. So I don't have any problem supporting getting rid of him. But all the actions leading up to that the CIA did, they create Muammar Gaddafi. They create all of these problems that they're like, you need us. See, What would you do without us? You live in a world of terror. Oh, this has been kicked up by you guys for like 70 years now. A lot of damage has been done by the CIA. And we find out over and over again they're very, 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 very duplicitous. Which, hey, can you blame them? They're a spy agency, so they don't trust people. But I don't think I had time to mention this when we got up to, like, you know, kind of the end of the 50s, the 60s, JFK getting elected. The the Bay of Pigs invasion, you know, read on that if you're not clear on what it is. It's a CIA organized coup to overthrow Fidel Castro. He's a communist. Got to get rid of him. And they take a bunch of Cuban exiles and train them on the beaches of Florida, drop them off, and it doesn't go well. It's a disaster. It was one of several options that the CIA had presented to JFK to deal with Castro. Assassinating him was one of them, but a much more sinister plot that it is on the books. This is on the archives. It's declassified information now. It's something called Operation Northwoods, and this is a CIA plan. There's plans on this that they detailed out and wrote because they were considering it and actually arguing for it at one point to fly civilian aircraft into high rises in Miami and blame Cuban extremists in order to justify an invasion of Cuba to get rid of their opposing political power and control the resources and region of the land, which is not a super far step away from the Maine, right? Which was also another potential idea that the government had to justify an incursion into Cuba or Spanish territory at the time in order to take control and possession. When you think about those two things being actual plans of the CIA, and then know some of just that they've killed a good handful of world leaders illegally, assassinated them. It's not super outside of the realm of possibility to imagine the CIA might have had some hand in 9/11 in some way. I'm not saying that they did. I'm not trying to be like what was the crazy documentary guy? Fahrenheit 9/11, Michael Moore. I'm not saying like, hey, the whole government planned this. I am saying that it wouldn't utterly shock me if I found out that there's some creepy deep state operatives that were putting stuff together about this because, well, we've got documented history of the government planning very specific things that sound a lot like that. So we didn't know that in 2001 either. People were very curious. They were like, wait, how did that happen? How could the government, like, what? And there's problems in what happens on 9/11 in terms of like logistics, but just like there are with JFK getting assassinated. Anytime there's a big national, emergency, tragedy, something of that magnitude, there's a whole plan put in place for where they're going to start moving people and heads of parts of the government around, and NORAD and all this stuff goes into effect, which, by the way, had been compromised. We didn't know it at the time, but in 9/11, Russia, no longer the Soviet Union, Russia in the 90s was spying on us just as much. They knew all of that. They knew all of those things. They knew our whole plan for what we'd do if we came under like foreign attack because of our own spies, our people in the CIA that sold out the CIA to the Russians. Was there a comment in there?
Walmart. I don't have time to do it. I have to focus on her.
What's that?
I'm working in HVAC tonight.
Hello?
Oh, hello?
Jennifer?
Oh, sorry, I didn't know I was unmuted.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't know I was unmuted. I was gonna tell you that the movie documentary guy was Michael Moore.
Yeah, yeah.
Isn't that who you were talking about?
Yes.
Remember?
Yeah.
Moore.
Which that came out, maybe a few years after 9/11. It was quite the raised a bunch of feathers. He's not a good. He's not a reputable source. He's kind of like an internet quack person, but he got people very hey, wait, a lot of this stuff doesn't add up and make sense, and really just threw a lot of confusion and questions out on things. I am not endorsing him. That's not a recommendation of Michael Moore by any means. But thank you for that.
There's a lot of people who say the same thing.
Yeah, he's not. He could have done better, but he's kind of I don't know. Well, okay, I'm gonna pull up YouTube real quick and just show you guys a couple clips. One, I just enjoyed this clip, so. The first McDonald's opening in Moscow after the Berlin Wall fell down, and there's glasnost, there's this openness, there's this economic restructuring, perestroika. So they're liberalizing. It's not the Soviet Union of the 40s and 50s. But do you see this giant line? This is all one line. This is one line of people here. That goes around an entire city block. It's a mile long.
Just for McDonald's?
To go to McDonald's. Because people have never been to McDonald's. Most of them never left the Soviet Union.
Compared with today.
I know, right?
None.
I'm like, dude, they're going to be disappointed.
Today. Well, compare before the COVID.
Yeah, right. Now all I see is a bunch of sick people right there. So, that's crazy. But okay, not only that they never had McDonald's, a lot of them had never had an American hamburger. A lot of them had never had a Coca-Cola.
Basically, never had fast food.
Never had fast food. Never had a Western. Yeah, I mean, this is mind-blowing that there's a McDonald's in the Soviet Union that quick too. I mean, they got in there. It's going to take a couple years before it falls apart. That's still the Soviet Union. McDonald's got in there. It's a more effective form of colonialism than the old school British way. Is dollar diplomacy. Get the corporations in there. Get American economy around the world.
Back then, when you never had weird menus.
Dude, I remember when those menus looked like that, when they were all brown.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Instead of long lines, they have long lines for cars.
Yeah, my gosh. That's pretty crazy. Okay, so I just had to show that because I thought it's such a what? Okay, wait. Worldview adjuster.
It says no that McDonald's has been made years ago.
That what?
No, McDonald's was built many years ago.
Oh yeah, the 50s. Yeah.
Sorry, and it got really popular. It's not just in the United States, and also almost around the world, I believe.
Oh man, they're by far the biggest restaurant around the world. Restaurant chain. They're all over. I mean, they're in 170 countries or something. They're everywhere. When I was in India, Indians don't eat beef. Cows are sacred animals. They made Bahariya Macs out of water buffalo that were actually much better than regular Big Macs. But they're everywhere. I mean, you can go anywhere and there's a McDonald's practically.
I remember
Starbucks too.
Yeah.
I think I remember one McDonald's. They kind of showed a little bit of history of the beginning, but I don't know. I forgot where to show that. A little.
I put a link to the trailer for the movie. Oh wait, what is the name of the movie now? Is it Ray or Kroc? It's about Ray Kroc. Oh no, it's called The Founder. Michael Keaton plays Ray Kroc.
Yeah.
It's really good. It's pretty funny actually, and it follows the history of the beginning of McDonald's.
Yeah, I heard of it. I heard of it.
That's a great movie.
Yeah, it's where you
That's
guys would like it
it's
if you
a
get a
super-
chance.
I think many people do a lot of stuff with McDonald's. Even the whole diet McDonald's thing. I forget what's it called. I think
Oh, the
I think it was in
Super
Health.
Size Me. Yeah.
Yes, a guy just had to do like a whole month just eating McDonald's, supersized.
Yeah. That's right. Okay, so
Yeah.
here's a video I want to show you guys because, everything that I just kind of like laid down about the Cold War and the CIA and just, it's bleak. It's bleak. There's a lot of bad, but there's a lot of good in the world too. There's a lot of good stuff happening, and I wish we had more time to talk about that as well. This is a quick synopsis of the last 200 years. He's basically looking from like 1800 to 2000 at demographics. So he's going to look at countries all over the world, and he makes them color coded. So all the Asian ones are red, all the European ones are orange, I believe. The American ones are blue. And he makes the bubbles for each country bigger depending on their population size. So China's bigger, right, than, say, Taiwan. So he makes these and graphs them out over 200 years. And he'll show how, there's war. Wars are actually slowing down in a weird way. Our potential for making bad war is better than ever. But we're getting healthier. We're living longer. People are getting better off materially. Some parts of our world are taking a lot longer to catch up than others, but there's a trend, and I agree with him. So we'll watch this just so it can leave us kind of with like a little happy punctuation at the end here.
Visualization is right at the heart of my own work too. I teach global health. And I know having the data is not enough. I have to show it in ways people both enjoy and understand. Now, I'm going to try something I've never done before. Animating the data in real space, with a bit of technical assistance from the crew.
So, here we go. First, an axis for health. Life expectancy. From 25 years to 75 years. And down here, an axis for wealth. Income per person. $400, $4,000, and $40,000. So, down here is poor and sick. And up here is rich and healthy. Now, I'm going to show you the world 200 years ago, in 1810. Here come all the countries. Europe brown, Asia red, Middle East green, Africa south of Sahara blue, and the Americas yellow. And the size of the country bubbles show the size of the population. And in 1810, it was pretty crowded down there, wasn't it? All countries were sick and poor. Life expectancy were below 40 in all countries. And only UK and the Netherlands were slightly better off, but not much. And now, why start the world? The Industrial Revolution makes countries in Europe and elsewhere move away from the rest. But the colonized countries in Asia and Africa, they are stuck down there. And eventually, the Western countries get healthier and healthier. And now we slow down to show the impact of the First World War and the Spanish flu epidemic. What a catastrophe! And now I speed up through the 1920s and the 1930s. And in spite of the Great Depression, Western countries forge on towards greater wealth and health. Japan and some others try to follow, but most countries stay down here. Now, after the tragedies of the Second World War, we stop a bit to look at the world in 1948. 1948 was a great year. The war was over, Sweden topped the medal table at the Winter Olympics, and I was born. But the differences between the countries of the world was wider than ever. United States was in the front, Japan was catching up. Brazil was way behind, Iran was getting a little richer from oil, but still had short lives. And the Asian giants, China, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh and Indonesia, they were still poor and sick down here. But look what is about to happen. Here we go again. In my lifetime, former colonies gained independence and then finally they started to get healthier and healthier and healthier. And in the 1970s, then countries in Asia and Latin America started to catch up with the Western countries. They became the emerging economies. Some in Africa follows. Some Africans were stuck in civil war and others hit by HIV. And now we can see the world today in the most up-to-date statistics. Most people today live in the middle, but there are huge differences at the same time between the best of countries and the worst of countries. And there are also huge inequalities within countries. These bubbles show country averages, but I can split them. Take China, I can split it into provinces. There goes Shanghai. It has the same wealth and health as Italy today. And there is the poor inland province Guizhou. It is like Pakistan. And if I split it further, the rural parts are like Ghana in Africa.
And yet, despite the enormous disparities today, we have seen 200 years of remarkable progress. That huge historical gap between the West and the rest is now closing. We have become an entirely new converging world. And I see a clear trend into the future. With aid, trade, green technology and peace, it's fully possible that everyone can make it to the healthy, wealthy corner.
Well, what you just seen in the last few minutes is a story of 200 countries shown over 200 years and beyond. It involved plotting of 120,000 numbers. Pretty neat, huh?
Well, that's a fun thought.